Well, welcome back to the Thursday evening lecture. As you can probably tell, the audio is not syncing to the video. We had a technical difficulty, so we had to go back and dub over the text of the lecture for this evening. So apologies for that, and hopefully you can bear with us as we work through our learning curve in audio and video and getting things on YouTube. So this week we're continuing on where we left off, discussing the Bodhisattvas. And if you're reading along in the PDF or with the printed version of the text, the translation from Bukkyo Dendo Kyokai, the Vimalakirti Sutra, the text continues, "Thus, jewel accumulation, according to sincerity, does the Bodhisattva generate his practice. According to his generation of practice, does he attain the profound mind. According to the profound mind, does he discipline his intention. According to the disciplining of his intention, does he practice in conformity with the teaching. According to his practice in conformity to the teaching, is he able to rededicate merit." So the question here is, how do we accomplish the Bodhisattva path? So we've set out on the Bodhisattva path. We've gotten to the place where we've taken some of the truths of the Buddha's teaching, and we've gotten a deep understanding of those, such as impermanence, which we've talked about in some past lectures. And perhaps we've gotten to the point where we understand, at least conceptually, that our happiness is truly linked to the happiness of all other people. That can be a scary place, and oftentimes we back away from the ledge, as we know the next leap appears to require that we span a wide chasm, and we have doubts. How does our practice move us from this side to that side? How do we literally get to the other shore? How do we find the path of cross? So the path here implies a level of pliancy. Our minds have to be pliant, have to be flexible. We can't be too rigid. In order for us to hear the teaching, we are often very rigid. We're averse to new ideas, we're new perspectives, or especially on existing ideas. The implication here is that with pliancy, that comes through practice, of course, that bodhisattvas can transfer their merits to others. So this is really giving us a great gift as the result of our practice, the ability to transfer merit. So how do we actually transfer merit to others? So it's done in several ways: aspirationally, spiritually, and also practically. So at the last lecture, we covered the various methods used by the Bodhisattva, used exactly in manners in which the Bodhisattva acts, and how that action is in response to the needs of sentient beings. In other words, skillful means, how we act towards and on behalf of others. If you look at the opposite of skillful means, which would be selfish action, self-serving actions, short-sighted actions, we can see more easily how those lead to harm to others. And so often we hear things like, "It's okay so long as it's not hurting someone else." I think these are actually statements that are short-sighted. Here we think there is no harm to another because there may not be a law against the conduct, or we can't see the likelihood of harming someone else. But very rarely is there any benefit to ourselves or anyone else when we refer to an action such as this. So here we're being asked to arouse a mind to act in a manner that leads us to attaining what the text here calls the profound mind. So what kind of mind is profound? You probably have no trouble at this point, according to the teaching, that understanding this, because the rough edges have been knocked off. You can say at this level of spiritual practice you're very smooth, and therefore it's easier for you to work with others and, more importantly, bestow the teaching on them. So who at least stereotypically does this in a natural way? Who works with others, is able to transform people very, very naturally? And to my mind, the people in our day-to-day life that immediately jump to mind are probably grandmothers, or a favorite teacher, where their presence alone is a teaching. Their presence transforms you. You naturally feel that you should change your behavior in the presence of these people. So they have a very profound effect just by being in the room with us. So then we ask, who do we have a tendency to accord with the energy, behavior, and language of whenever we're interacting with them? So here you can say, you see this as a recurring theme in the Vimalakirti Sutra. Where do we find these situations where just by presence alone people are transformed? And we see this time and again when people confront or who meet Vimalakirti along the way. And so the text continues. According to his rededication, does he have skillful means? According to his skillful means, does he make sentient beings accomplish liberation? According to his accomplishment of sentient beings, is his Buddha land pure? According to the purity of the Buddha land, is his explanation of the Dharma pure? According to the purity of his explanation of the Dharma, is his wisdom pure? According to the purity of his wisdom, is his mind pure? According to the purity of his mind, are all his merits pure? Therefore, jewel accumulation, if a bodhisattva wishes to attain a pure land, he should purify his mind. According to the purity of his mind, is his Buddha land pure? Phrase almost like questions, actually. These are statements. Because the bodhisattva constantly dedicates or focuses his merit, he develops skillful means. Because of that skillful means, he leads sentient beings to accomplish liberation. Because those sentient beings are then led to accomplishment of liberation, his Buddha land is pure. Because he explains the Dharma with purity, it shows that his wisdom is pure. Because his wisdom is pure, all of his merit, basically the result of his practices and his actions, are pure. So if you reread the text and perhaps read it in that way, it becomes a little bit more clear. It really lays out a flowchart of the results of our karma when dedicated towards practice. With the energy properly focused on practice, the result is skillful means, liberation, leading others to liberation, an assembly of beings engaged in practice, wisdom, a pure mind, and merit, leading back to how that merit is then used. So it's really a feedback loop. You can think of it as a practice positive feedback loop. In this loop, things only increase. Compare that to other systems, and we see how leaks undermine those systems. So if you continue on at that point with the text reading along, either the PDF or the printed version, at that time, Sariputra was influenced by the Buddha's numinous charisma to have this thought. If the Bodhisattva's Buddha land is pure according to the purity of the Bodhisattva's mind, then when our world-honored one was a Bodhisattva, his mind must have been pure. Nevertheless, this Buddha land is so impure. The Buddha knew what he was thinking and asked him, "What do you think? Although the blind do not see them, can the sun and moon be anything but pure?" Sariputra answered, "No, world-honored one. This is the fault of the blind, not that of the sun and the moon." The Buddha then asked Sariputra, "Is it through the transgressions of sentient beings that they do not see the purity of the Tathagata's Buddha land? This is not the Tathagata's fault. Sariputra, this land of mine is pure, but you do not see it." This is a really, I think, basic question for anyone who's looking at the idea of our world, our day-to-day world, being the pure land of the Buddha, and we look around and see problems from our perspective with this land. And so we wonder if this land is the result of the Buddha's compassion and practice, and if that practice is pure, how can then we have the things that we see around us? So to address some of Sariputra's doubt, first you should note a few things. The source of Sariputra's doubt is not the actual doubt of Sariputra. The text is clear that the doubt is the Buddha's numinous charisma. Remember above, the merits are used to transform beings. So the situation arises, the situation that we see here in the text arises from that interaction between the two. And it's probably a very normal question. Wait, if the Buddha's mind is pure, this wisdom is perfect, and this is our world, and this world is a pure land, what about all the suffering and all these things that aren't pure? What gives? And the Buddha's answer here is very interesting. It includes metaphors. So note, the Buddha leads Sariputra to the answer. He doesn't provide him with a direct answer. He tried to transform him so that he sees the answer for himself. So recall above that skillful means are used to lead people towards liberation, not to gather them up, toss them into a wagon, and drive them off to the solution himself. So the first allusion or metaphor he uses is the sun and the moon. So these are the two sources of natural illumination for our world. Whether you recognize them or not, they are there. In the same way, whether sentient beings recognize it or not, the Buddha's teaching has the capability of leading us towards liberation. It's not that the moon or sun don't glow brightly enough, it's we who can't see. It's something is obscuring our vision. So Sariputra agrees with this analogy. The second, the Buddha then goes on to say to Sariputra that this land of mine is pure, but you do not see it. There's even more depth here if you consider how far the light of the sun is visible. We look up at the night sky and see the light of countless distant stars shining on countless distant worlds, and those worlds we can't see with our eyes, yet we can see that light. So how can this land be pure? Didn't the Buddha awaken here? Doesn't that mean that this world of ours has all of the necessary components to awaken us? What awakened the Buddha? The exact things that we often run away from. It's the exact beginning of the Buddhist path, that suffering, the realization of old age, sickness, and the passing away of life are the things that awaken people to the path. So this is how the Buddha says this land of mine is pure. It's a perfect place for us to do spiritual practice and achieve spiritual awakening. So the text continues from there. At that time, Conch-Crest Brahma King said to Sariputra, "Do not think thus, saying that this Buddha's land is not pure. Why? I have witnessed the purity of Sakyamuni's Buddha land. It is like the heavenly palace of Ishvara." Sariputra said, "As I observe this land, it is hills and hollows, brambles and gravel, and rocks and mountains, all filled with defilements." Conch-Crest Brahma King said, "Sir, your mind has perceived high and low, because you are not relying on Buddha wisdom. Hence you perceive this land as impure. Sariputra, the Bodhisattva is universally same, meaning in attitude, regarding all sentient beings. The purity of his profound mind relies on Buddha wisdom, and therefore is able to perceive the purity of this Buddha land." So first, who's speaking here? It's Brahma Deva, referred to as Conch-Crest Brahma King. Refers to the manner in which Brahma wears his hair. It's usually shown in artwork as curled like a conch shell. So we're talking about the tuft of hair on his head that resembles the conch. So this is where the name derives from. So after being lectured by the Buddha, Sariputra now gets lectured by God. It was a tough day at school. Again, it isn't a single answer here, but it's something that leads the student to see the answer. So Brahma's giving Sariputra a series of analogies or a setup, basically, for him to come to the answer himself. And that setup is this, 3 steps. Because you don't rely on Buddha wisdom, Sariputra, you see only negative, only the superficial. Second, what is the difference between yourself and the Bodhisattva? Sariputra, and as well as we, still see distinctions, whereas no matter the conduct, there's still, the Bodhisattva is not making distinctions between people. So we still see distinctions, the Bodhisattva doesn't. And third, the Bodhisattva relies on wisdom, and therefore does not see distinctions, therefore sees only the purity of his Buddha land. So it's an issue of point of view, perspective, and also what and how the mind sees things. Not that the land is inherently pure, but how we set our mind sees these alleged defilements, these alleged distinctions. So the text continues. At this point, the Buddha pointed to the earth with his toe, and instantly the trimegalocosm was as if ornamented with 100,000 jewels. It was like the jewel ornamentation land, with all its innumerable merits of jewel ornament Buddha. The entire great assembly exclaimed at this unprecedented event, as they all saw themselves sitting on many jeweled lotus flowers. So here we see the Buddha manifest a supernatural event to illustrate his point. I think we can also understand the scene from our perspective. If we've never seen things from this perspective, never had this consideration, this is a world-shaking event. It is a life-altering, you may feel like the ground move. And you see this used in poetic language, right? Someone experiences something, they say, it was like feeling the earth move or heaven shake. So maybe you can see straight away how Sariputra's mind was changed. And so the text goes on. Here is Sariputra's own mind that has changed, and insight thereby gained. So this reminded me of a poem by Robert Frost. I think it might help illustrate Sariputra's experience and the Buddha's insight, what was being taught. So the poem is called Revelation by Robert Frost. We make ourselves a place apart, being behind light words that tease and flout. But oh, the agitated heart, till someone find us really out. 'Tis pity if the case require, or so we say, that in the end we speak the literal to inspire the understanding of a friend. But so with all, from babes that play at hide and seek to God afar, so all who hide too well away must speak and tell us where they are. It is us who hide away our true self, and we must reveal it for ourselves. This is the true teaching that the Buddha is trying to impart here. So the text continues there. The Buddha told Sariputra, "You should now observe the purity of this Buddha land." And Sariputra responded, "So it is, world-honored one. Originally, I did not see it. Originally, I did not hear it. Now the purity of the Buddha's country is entirely apparent." The Buddha then said to Sariputra, "My Buddha country is always pure, like this. It is only so as to save inferior persons here that am manifested as a defiled and impure land. It is like the many jeweled eating utensils used in common by the gods, the food of which is of different colors depending on their merits. Just so, Sariputra, if a person's mind is pure, he sees the merits and ornaments of this land." When the Buddha manifested the purity of this country, the 500 elder sons, led by jewel accumulation, all achieved forbearance of the non-arising of dharmas. 84,000 people all generated the intention to achieve Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. The Buddha then withdrew his numinous powers, and the world returned to its former appearance. The 32,000 gods and humans who sought Shravaka's vehicle understood that conditioned dharmas were all entirely impermanent, and distantly transcending sensory defilement, they attained purity of the Dharma eye. 8,000 bhikshus achieved non-experiencing of the dharmas, their minds liberated by the elimination of the flaws. So I think the important takeaways here are that the Buddha is pointing out that our world, our everyday existence, is not something to be turned away from. It's something to be embraced. It's the perfect place for us to do practice. It has all the elements that we need to achieve enlightenment, to practice meditation, and it is only our current perspective that's not grounded in compassion, that we sometimes want to turn away from the things we see in the world. So I think it's truly a call to all Buddhist practitioners to really embrace the things we see, even the difficult things that we see on a day-to-day basis, be they in our actual lives, there's something we see on the news, something we read about, and all of those things are fuel for our own transformation.